Gotham Knights is certainly my most anticipated game for 2022, and it's something that us Batman fans have been waiting a long time since the release of 2013's Batman Arkham Origins and 2015's Batman Arkham Knight. So it's been a long time between drinks for a Batman-based game. So I'm really looking forward to what WB Games Montreal can deliver for us this year. We found out some more details about Gotham Knights through a interview with Geoff, Ellenor, and Fleur Marty, who work at WB Games Montreal. Marty is an executive producer, whereas Ellenor is the game director. So we found out a few story details, which I'll cover through first, and then we found out a few more details about the gear system. So the first question that they pose is, does the game start with Batman's death? Is the intro scene what we saw in the first trailer with the reveal of his death and the Bat family regrouping? Fleur Marty says that's exactly it. It's an interesting starting point for us because each of the four characters have their own way of dealing with grief and taking on the mantle of the Bat. Ellenor adds to that by saying they all get back together and have different past relationships. Red Hood is the least connected to the group at the story's start. Our version of Robin is quite a young character, so his way of dealing with the situation is different to everyone else's. The death of Bruce starts their journey through the game and also sets the tone for a really important aspect of the story, which is how they take on Batman's job and learn how to get along together. I find that a really fascinating way to start the game. I think it throws us right into it. I still think there may be some potential for the game to start with you playing as Batman and showing you how he died, or, you know, might disappear depending on if you read some of the Court of Owls storylines before. But moving on, how old is Dick Grayson in the story, and how long was he studying under Bruce? Can you walk me through the timeline? Marty says he's the oldest of the bunch and had left Bruce. They didn't leave on the best of terms, and he's back in Gotham because Batman is dead, and that's the reason he is back. He was his own hero. He's dealing with a bit of grief and guilt of where he left things with Bruce before he died. I feel like that's going to be a really interesting story mechanic, and how the characters all deal with the death or disappearance of Bruce Wayne, however you may want to look at it. And it's going to provide for some interesting story and backgrounds, and I certainly think there'll be some flashbacks of all of the Gotham Knights with Bruce Wayne throughout the game. Another question, Nightwing is a former ward of Batman and Flying Grayson's. In the trailer that we saw at the Summer Games Fest, it appeared that his combat draws from both backgrounds with gadgets, brutal attacks, and some acrobatic ones. Can you talk to me about designing Nightwing for this game and what you wanted to achieve from his moveset and traversal? Ellenor says, you hit upon one of his touchstones for us. He's an acrobat. Nightwing in our story is a kind of cocky character. He's dealing with the death of Bruce in his own way, which is mostly by cracking jokes and not talking about it a lot. He's one of the characters that is the most capable of doing constant acrobatic stuff. His combat abilities focus on him getting up into the air and doing more aerial damage. It is one of the foundations of who he is and how he fights. Marty adds, as for the traversal, we've drawn inspiration from existing comics, but it's the flying trapeze, otherwise known as the Fortnite glider, which is still a little bit divisive amongst some fans, but I don't mind how all the knights are looking a little bit different in terms of the way that they move around. So moving on to some details about Red Hood. In your version, is your version of Jason Todd the Red Hood similar to the one in the comics? Did he die, and did he come back to life from a different Earth? Ellenor says he is resurrected and was recently murdered. I assume that's by the Joker, but we'll have to find out more about that in the story. You'll learn more about that throughout the game and what happened to him. Obviously, that is what makes him different from the other knights. Some of the other comic interpretations of Red Hood that we like, he's kind of a mystic character. He's been changed by his experience, and that's what he brings to the table and how he expresses himself in his abilities. Now, I find that very interesting. One of the most, I suppose, controversial elements from the Nightwing Red Hood showcase was the fact that Red Hood was using the Mystic Leap. I think it's a very cool concept, but I understand why some people are a little bit hesitant by the choice of traversal, but I think it's really important to have distinct traversal and fighting styles for each of the 4 knights. We find out some more details about the batcycle. So in some of the early gameplay clips, we see heroes roaring along the highways. Those shots make it look bigger than some of the Arkham game cities. How much real estate are we looking at? Ellenor says it's pretty big. I haven't put one map over the other, but our Gotham is a big place. I tend to spend a lot of time of my Zoom calls on the batcycle driving around Gotham. It's one of the most fastest and most chill ways to move around the city. It feels like a very big place. Marty says, for sure, it's the biggest version of Gotham that has been represented in video games. The most important thing is the density and verticality. It has a lot of layers. The batcycle is a long-range mode of transportation. And there's another question about the batcycles and how customizable is the batcycle. Ellenor says, we let you tweak the colorways for the bike for self-expression. A majority of the abilities around the batcycles are focused on the hero, like how you jump off it and go into combat. Marty says the batcycle itself is not upgradable. Ellenor adds on, you can change the way it looks and how it makes noise, which I think's cool, but I would have liked to have been able to customize the batcycle in terms of the way that we were able to upgrade the Batmobile in Arkham Knight. So there's a lot of information about the gear, which we've talked about previously, but I'm much more interested in how the missions work. So we don't know much about how missions work, but can you talk us through the different story missions and the side activities? Ellenor says, without giving anything away that we want to talk about in future communication, the city has a lot of different stuff you can do. You can find some of it by moving around. We have an AR vision we showed off in the gameplay trailer. That is a great way to find things to do. As for mission structure, if you are an action/adventure fan, you'd be very familiar with it. We have an ongoing case file that is the mystery that you are investigating. If you play through the story, you unlock new chapters in that case file that tell you where to go. So I think that's more referring to the main storyline, which is the Court of Owls. But there will be other side missions and character stories throughout the game, which I think are very interesting. Something else that we found out is that each of the Gotham Knights will have 11 different suit styles, which I think is quite a lot, and we can customize these through gear and blueprints that we find while we are patrolling Gotham, and then we can upgrade those in the workbench that we see in the Belfry, which we saw in the Red Hood and Nightwing showcase back in May. So that's the end of today's video. I hope you found out some new details about Gotham Knights, and hopefully you can like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in a future video. Cheers.